Right. I think that is enough time to count everybody get settled. So for those of you that have already logged in, as I said, thank you so much for being here. We're very excited for tonight's lecture. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Brett McAllister. I'm the Director for Graduate Admissions for the Halmos College of Arts and Sciences. With me is one of my team members, Ms. Farah Amro, who will be your dedicated admissions specialist for this department. Thank you very much, Farah, for being here as well. And now for the most important guest of the evening, we have with us today Dr. Janine Morris. So her title for tonight is going to be Building Academic Bridges, How Writers Navigate Identity, Emotion, and Community. Dr. Morris is an associate professor in the Department of Communications, Media, and the Arts, and a faculty coordinator here at NSU. Writing and Communication Center. She received her Ph.D. in English with a concentration in Composition and Rhetoric from the University of Cincinnati, and her MA in English from the University of Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Dr. Morris's research interests span areas of writing studies, including media literacy and fake news, emotions, affect, materiality, and online writing instruction and writing center studies, with an emphasis on graduate student writing support. So she will be one of the top people when you are a student with us that you will be working with, I have no doubt. Now, just to let all of you do know, we will have a Q&A session at the end. It's going to be about 10 to 15-ish minutes. That will be, please feel free to hold any questions to the end to throw in the chat. And with that being said, Dr. Morris, thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I'm very excited to learn more about your topic. And with that, floor is yours. Let us know if you need anything else.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much to everybody who is here. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you being here and your support. So thank you. Let me just get my Canva open. Okay, so thank you so much, Brett, for the introduction. Like I said, I'm very excited to be here with everybody this evening and really appreciate you being willing to come and listening to me share a little bit with you about my work. And so in planning for today, I spent a lot of time thinking about the different connective threads that have influenced my research and my time in higher education, and the bridges that helped connect the ideas that I developed over time with the people who helped support me in my journey. And so before I start, I just want to talk a little bit about some of my broad research interests. And through our time tonight, you'll see how those have shaped and changed over time. So I am a writing instructor. My primary focus is teaching writing. And so I spend a lot of time in the classroom and working with students in different capacities. I'm very influenced by women's rhetoric, women's rhetorical history, and gender studies. I'm influenced by scholarship on emotions and relationships and relationality, affect, materiality. I've always been very interested in graduate students and in different kinds of literacy. So that would be, reading, different technologies, and materiality. So I'm going to talk about how some of these threads have changed over time and about some of the projects that I've been part of. And I also really want to stress three things that I value because they've come up throughout my academic journey, and they're things that I carry with me as a professor. So one of those are collaboration, the second is mentorship, and the third is an openness to growth and learning, because they really did all influence where I am today. So like Brett said, I am from Windsor, Ontario, Canada, which is across the bridge from Detroit, Michigan. And I grew up with two parents who were lawyers. And growing up, the idea was always that I was going to be a lawyer too. And so as an undergraduate student, I lived at home, I commuted to campus, I worked multiple jobs, and I was not the best undergraduate student. I struggled initially in a lot of my classes. I did not go to some of my classes. And it wasn't until I started taking English and psychology that I turned around a little bit and, started to enjoy the classes that I was taking. However, I was never really involved on campus as an undergraduate student. And so my plan was to take the LSAT, go to law school, become a lawyer, and that would be it. I took the LSAT. I did not do amazing on the LSAT. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to just do my master's in Windsor, and then rewrite the LSAT again a year or two later once I was done with my MA. And it was really in my MA program where everything turned around. Everything changed for me. I got involved on campus. I loved what I was doing. I learned about what writing studies is as a field. And this decision to go to grad school and do my MA completely changed my life. So there are three things I want to talk about from this time that kind of shaped my growth after that. So the first was getting involved on campus. The second was courses that really influenced my thinking and growth. And the third was just being introduced to the field of writing studies. So you can see on the screen, the program was English Language and Literature. So it's a really pretty typical literature focused program. There was also a creative writing stream that I was not part of, but you could do that. So it was very traditional English studies. And in Canada at the time, writing studies wasn't really a huge focus. And so, I didn't even know that that was a field until I got there. And so the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is just my involvement on campus. When I started my master's, I became part of a group called the Feminist Research Group. And this group was run out of the psychology department. And it was a group of graduate students, mostly women, who hosted conferences. They brought speakers to campus. They did outreach and advocacy. And it was my first introduction to cross-disciplinary collaboration and having an opportunity to work with others, especially women. I was also chosen as a student representative for the Center for Research in Reasoning, Argumentation, and Rhetoric. And so CRAR was the closest thing we really had to a focus on rhetoric or rhetorical practice, but it was really a lot of philosophy professors, so like reasoning, argumentation, but it was an introduction into rhetoric and being involved in a community of people who cared about rhetoric. And so because of my role as the student representative for this group, I got to present as part of a symposium. I helped host events and brought speakers to campus. And the third thing that I was involved in was I was the student representative for the English department. And so that meant that I got to sit in on department meetings, and I got a better idea of what it meant to be a faculty member, which I thought was really cool. That I saw my professors teaching, but I didn't really know what kind of things professors did or talked about. And so being in those meetings really helped me see that, and it was really that was really fascinating for me. And so part of my MA, I took some classes that also really had a big influence on me. So I took a class about restoration in 18th century literature with a professor named Catherine Quincy. And in that class, I first learned about the kind of recovery work that was happening that looked at figures who were underappreciated or undervalued. Um, and so that's something that's really big in women's rhetorical history, and women's rhetoric is trying to do this recovery. And so in this class, I focused on a woman named Eliza Haywood, who was an 18th century writer, and she created the precursor to the women's magazine. So it was the first periodical for women written by a woman called The Female Spectator, which ran between 1744 and 1746. And I thought she was just like the most interesting person out there. She was a romance writer, and then she got shunned for writing these romance novels. And then The Female Spectator came out, and it was an anonymous publication. And so she wrote as a panel of four women. So if you think about The View or like any kind of talk show where there's like an older, like matronly one, and then, a conservative one and a young one, that's what The Female Spectator had. And so through the issues, they would publish advice. They would talk about things like women's like leisure time and how women misuse their time. But this publication was really influential because in order to keep running, it had to speak to what readers wanted and needed. And so when I went to apply for my PhD program, I thought like, I'm going to learn and write about Eliza Haywood, and that's what my PhD is going to be on. And so you'll see how that evolved and changed over time. But this class was one of the ones that was very, very influential to me. And then the other thing that was incredibly influential and kind of the first bridge that I'll talk about is this introduction to the field of writing studies. And so, as I said before, that writing studies really wasn't an area of focus in Canada, it wasn't as common. And through my assistantship in the English department, I got to teach composition. And as like a new, early 20s composition instructor, I was so nervous. I was nervous every single class. I was terrified. Um, but I became really interested in what it's like to be a teacher and a graduate student and a young woman. And my first conference presentation, I actually looked back to find it for today, was at my first national conference. It's called the Feminisms and Rhetoric Conference, and it's a big, one of the big conferences in my field, but focusing on gender and feminism. And my presentation was called Collaboration, Community, and Confidence, Examining the Benefits of Graduate Student Societies. So thinking about some of those threads I mentioned earlier, this very early conference presentation, it looked at like my identity as a graduate student, it looked at collaboration and just the value of these women's groups that people have. And so, even early on, those threads were there and were starting to form. But because I got really interested in composition, we had to take a practicum because we were teaching. And Dale was the only person who did composition. And so he agreed to do directed readings with some of us who were really interested in the field. And through our directed reading, Holly, who's the one with the scarf here, and I were invited to join Dale's class trip where they spent 2 weeks in New York City. It was a writing about the arts class. And so we had the idea that to help kind of document their time in New York, they would use Google Maps. And they would make, instead of doing like a traditional e-portfolio or a portfolio of their time, they would use Google Maps to make these e-portfolios. And so after that trip, Dale and Holly and I wrote an article that got published in Composition Studies, which was my first article, talking about that trip. And so, without Dale, without this class, without that trip, like that article wouldn't exist. And so it was very, very influential to me. And so thinking about some of the connections that came out of my time at Windsor, when I was finishing up my master's, like a lot of my graduate students that I've worked with here at NSU, I went straight from undergrad to master's. By the time I was finishing my master's, I felt really burnt out. I was tired, I was stressed, and the thought of applying for a PhD felt so overwhelming and unmanageable. And so Dale encouraged me to take a year off. And he said, do something else for a year. And so I worked as a medical transcriptionist in a pathology office, and quickly realized that was not the job for me and decided, what, I do want to go back and go to grad school. And so as I was going back and thinking about applying to graduate programs, Dale really encouraged me to think about like, what do I need that would be a good fit for me? What do I need to be successful? And so I'm somebody who, I'm not competitive. I like, small groups. And so I wanted a program that sort of reflected those kind of things. And Dale and my mentor, after Dale, her name's Laura Michiki. The two of them worked together at a previous institution and then published this edited collection together called A Way to Move. And this talked about the rhetorics of emotion and composition studies. So, again, my initial interest in emotions comes from Dale and Laura and their work. And so he suggested, I should apply to the University of Cincinnati. That's where Laura taught. They have a small comp rep program. And the other thing that spoke to me about UC's program is that it was an English department. So it had creative writing, it had literature, and it had comp rep as its own track. And so to me, that was really appealing because, all I knew was literature pretty much up to that point. And so I was able to continue taking literature classes as a PhD student and do comp rad at the same time. And the other reason why I knew that Cincinnati was a good fit for me was because I'd been to Cincinnati before. During our master's program, we really, um, my cohort mates and I took advantage of the regional and graduate student conferences that were happening in the area. And so Cincinnati had a graduate student conference every year. And so we went to Cincinnati and just like the people there were amazing. Everybody was so kind. It was a really cool city. And so I, having gone there for the conference and driven through it a couple times to other conferences, knew like, okay, this is going to be a good place for me. And so during my time at Cincinnati, I continued to do those things that were helpful for me at Windsor. I, took advantage of different opportunities that supported my teaching, learning, and professional growth. I used coursework to help grow my expertise. And then I found this community of mentors, collaborators, and people to work with. And so for any of you who are thinking about, postgraduate work, going into grad school, finding a program that supports your interest and values is so important. I talked about applying to Cincinnati, wanting to write about Eliza Haywood. You'll see that changed. No one at Cincinnati did 18th century literature. So there were, other than Laura doing women's rhetoric, there really wasn't the support there to do that kind of historical work. So that sort of fell away. But my interest in gender, in literacy, in teaching, in emotion, all of that continued to be cultivated at Cincinnati. Also think it's really important to find a graduate program that will help you find opportunities to grow and learn. Um, I graduated from there in 2016, and even in that time, the amount of stuff you have to have on your CV to distinguish yourself is so much. And so it's really important, to find a program that, not only fits your personality, but has those opportunities for you so that when you finish, you're able to market those experiences and have things to talk about. And also one that prioritizes you and your professionalization. Where professors want to work with you, where people care about what you're doing. And, I think that's something that I certainly have brought with me to NSU, and I know our faculty here have as well, that, we try to do these things for our students, but I always encourage students when they're looking for programs to do all of that. And so while I was at Cincinnati, I took advantage of a couple different opportunities, both in and out of house that, again, like I wouldn't be where I am without these opportunities. And so, the more I can stress like getting involved and taking advantage of things that come up, I think the better. So my in-house experiences included, I was part of the English graduate organization at Cincinnati. And so we hosted a conference every year where we, brought together people from all sorts of programs. The conference that I had visited as a master's student, I got to host it. And, it was a really good experience putting that together. If anyone's ever done any kind of event or organizing, you're using a lot of skills in doing that. Um, and the other opportunity I had in-house was that Laura took over the editor position of a journal called Composition Studies. And my cohort mate, Christina, and I were able to work as editorial assistants. And I truly believe that my time at Composition Studies, like, changed how I read and write, and I became a much stronger reader and writer because of that. So we got to review submissions, we got to talk to people at conferences, and we're part of the whole editorial process, from beginning to the end of the publication. And then in the field of writing studies, there are also some really amazing professional opportunities that are available for everyone in the discipline. And so one of those is called DMAC. It's housed at the Ohio State University, and it's the Digital Media and Composition Institute. So every year, for a week or 2 weeks, they bring together experts in digital composing. And so as a student, I went and I learned about digital writing, different tools. And when I got back to Cincinnati, I was able to propose my own undergraduate special topics course focused on digital composition. which when I went on the job market was helpful because it was something I had taught and I could bring with me to the places where I applied. The other opportunity is called the Dartmouth Summer Seminar for Writing Research. And so that's at Dartmouth. And I went there as I was working on my starting my dissertation. And again, 2 weeks, you're with a whole bunch of experts and you have this really focused time where you can write and work on your projects. And that was really helpful for me for developing what I ended up writing about. But through all of these experiences, I had the opportunity to publish because of them. So had I not gone to DMAC, had I not gone to Dartmouth, had I not gone to composition studies, these publications and these experiences would not exist. So Computers and Composition, which is one of the big journals in the field, had a retrospective issue about DMAC and its influence. And because Laura knew that I had gone to DMAC, she invited me to do this keywords article with other people who had gone to DMAC over the years. And so that was really my first opportunity to collaborate with others on such a big scale. And then Kelly and I were the ones who had gone to Dartmouth together. We were really interested in reading. Our friend Hannah, who was also in the program, was really interested in materiality, so like objects. And so we ended up writing an article based on a conference presentation about the materiality of reading and writing. So again, like Dartmouth, us working together, doing this conference presentation. So you can see on the screen, it says that it began as a panel at the College English Association conference in 2015. That came from that. And then the other two publications were with Christina, Laura, and I, because of what we did with composition studies. And so the explanation points is an edited collection that is advice for writing in the field. And so we wrote an article together about editing practices, based off of what we did with composition studies. And then probably one of the most significant publications that came out of that work in that time is this article, Editing as Inclusion Activism. So this is published in the journal College English, which is one of the biggest journals in the field. But when Laura took over composition studies, she really focused on making the journal and the editorial practices more transparent and inclusive. And so we would go to conferences and invite graduate students, underrepresented scholars to submit their work. And so in the article, we talk about ways that editors could be more inclusive, transparent, and open in their editing practices and when they work with authors. And so this article ended up being the lead article of the issue that it was published in, and is open access so that other people are able to read it. So thinking about like having these experiences, there's so many things that can come out of them. And sometimes, just getting out of your shell a little bit and trying them can lead to a lot of great opportunities. So like I said before, Eliza Haywood and I were on a little break while I was at Cincinnati, and a couple courses really affected what I ended up writing about for my dissertation. So one semester I took a course on reading practices with a professor named Gary Weissman. And at the same time, Laura was teaching a writing workshop course. So just like, creative writing, you would go and do a workshop course. This course was a workshop-based course, but for academic writing. So at the same time, these two courses really started to impact my reading and writing practices. And in Gary's course, we read an article by a scholar named N. Catherine Hales, who talked about, she put reading on a binary, where she said, print paper reading is good, digital screen reading is bad. And I was just so angry and annoyed about her argument. And that really was like the seed that started my dissertation. And so my dissertation explored how university students engage in digital reading across different contexts, emphasizing the situational factors and how genres affect different reading behaviors. So through surveys and interviews, I try to show how like the binary that Hales had set up between like print good, digital bad, really oversimplifies what we do when we read. And instead, reading practices are complex, they're embodied, how we use our bodies and where and when and how we read, it all changes. And just the situational nature of reading, it it varies all the time. And so that's what that dissertation was trying to do, was show that, reading practices, we can't, it's too simple to just say that print is good and digital is bad. They're much more complicated than that. And so after that, I was fortunate to have a article published about digital reading. Um, but you'll see, like, my research has really kind of moved on since that time. And then the last bridge I really want to stress at Cincinnati is just like how impactful my cohort mates were. And so when I was at Cincinnati, it was the third year of the CompRep PhD program. So Hannah in the green scarf was the first year. She was the first student to be in the CompRep track. The English program at Cincinnati had a very long history, but this was new for CompRep. Allison was the second year, so she was in her own cohort, and then Christina and I were together. So it was the four of us really at the time that were kind of going through a lot of things together. And then since then, there have been more and more and more students in the grad program there who are doing great things. But the four of us ended up forming a writing group. And this writing group was incredibly influential for all of us. We would meet, once a week, once a month. We would sit down, we'd write together in person, at coffee shops, in the library, over Skype, through Facebook. And after we finished, we ended up publishing an article together about the importance of writing group. So going back to my initial conference presentation about, feminist groups building confidence, um, here I was in my practices continuing that kind of trajectory where I relied on the women around me, to form these like supportive communities that again affected my confidence, allowed me to help finish this program. And that really influenced not only my writing, but then who I wanted to become as a professor and a professional. I was very fortunate in 2016 to graduate and get the job here at NSU. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever got about going to graduate school was to think about your time in graduate school like you are in a 4 or 5 year job. So at the end of the job, you may have the same job, you may get to continue being a professor, but you might not. And so it's really important to think about like the different things you might do if you don't get that same job at the end of the day. Like I knew that if I didn't get to be a professor, I love teaching, I would maybe want to go into hospitals and do curriculum or like education work in hospitals. Based on my transcription experiences, I thought that'd be a cool environment. So I knew I had in the back of my mind, if I don't get to be a professor, there are other things that I want to do with this degree. So I think that's really important. And then, so since graduating, my work has really evolved from there. I was really lucky at NSU, to be able to teach graduate classes. The picture on the screen here is from, I think, the first CRDM class that I got to teach. And so, it's been really nice to be able to apply some of those things like collaboration, mentorship, and learning in the work that I do as a teacher. And so now at NSU, there are sort of two strands to the research that I've been doing. And both of those come out of, my past experiences and then my everyday here. And so the first one comes out of my work in the Writing Center. So in 2018, I started working as a faculty coordinator here in the Writing and Communication Center. And this position really brings together all of my interest, like all of my research interests I get to explore in the day-to-day work and in my research here in the WCC. And so one of the major areas of research that has come out of the Writing Center deals with emotions and affect. And so Kelly is one of the other faculty coordinators here. And so she and I, over a couple semesters of working with students in the Writing Center, started to notice that our consultants experienced a lot of emotions. So, their students, they have a lot of things going on, but they have to engage in this emotional labor when they come to the writing center, where they are professional, they're poised, their emotions can't get the best of them. At the same time, they're working with students who are very emotional. They're stressed about their writing, they're stressed about their courses. And so we needed a language and a way to help our consultants talk about what they were experiencing. And so we wanted to focus on, what do emotions do? What role do they play in institutional context? And so Kelly and I did an edited collection where we asked people to make visible the emotional labor and effective qualities of writing center work and experiences, and writing and working in emotions in higher education. And thinking back to my bridges, this work was really influenced by Laura's work. And I was really fortunate, we were really fortunate that Laura was the series editor at Parlor Press for this particular area where we published this book. And so I continue to be mentored by Laura through this major publication process, which was very exciting. And so the collection focuses on administration, tutoring, and training. And so in the collection, we tried to bring together multiple perspectives that looked at emotions from all these different lenses, because we knew that there were individual articles about emotions, people were talking about it, but there was nothing that brought all sorts of perspectives together in writing centers to talk about emotions. And, this collection was really, has led to some really amazing experiences. Kelly and I were invited to talk at Virginia Tech. One of the regional writing center associations had this book as their book club. So we got to zoom in and be part of their book club. And we were able to be featured on a couple of podcasts. So it was really, a really great experience, and something that still affects how we work with consultants in the writing center. And then more recently, a lot of what I do in the Writing Center is in support of our graduate student consultants. And so one thing that I noticed in reading different Writing Center journals is that a lot of people talk about graduate student writers, but there are not that many people who talk about graduate student writing consultants. When there are articles about graduate student writing consultants, it's always about how can they help other graduate student writers, and not about what they are experiencing themselves. And so the project that I'm working on right now asks, how do graduate consultants relate their writing center work to their professional, oh, I'm sorry about that typo, their professional identities. And so this project is supported by 2 grants, and I've done surveys and we'll be doing interviews to look at the experiences of graduate student writing consultants. And so what I'm seeing so far is that through the surveys, that respondents express that their writing center work improved their own writing and exposed them to strategies and genres that were not explicitly being taught in their departments. So they were coming across different ways of writing, even for their own discipline, that they weren't learning about in their grad programs. And then the other thing that I found was that although many found that writing center work enhanced their teaching and communication skills, people who were not in English-related disciplines, who weren't in like English or composition, they did not always see a connection between their writing center work and their identities. So that's something I want to explore more in the interviews. And then finally, the last area of my research, is different from the Writing Center research, but still brings together a lot of these bridges and connective threads that I've talked about already. So the other area of work that I've been doing is on professionalization and online literacy instruction. And so to see all of these connections and how they were built. When I was at Cincinnati, I took a brief online course about online teaching practices that was run out of the College of Nursing. And that was the first time I ever learned that people study how we teach online. But it wasn't in the field. So it was more like, how do you set up an online course? How do you use the learning management system? A little bit of communication practices, but nothing really, not about writing. And so in 2016 or 2017, I went to the Conference on College Composition and Communication, and they had a workshop that was focused on online writing instruction. So I decided I would attend that workshop. During the workshop, people were invited to talk to each other and think about what are some possible ideas. And so the woman that you see on the screen here, her name is Marcella. So she and I, and then another woman, and then this guy down here, his name is Kevin, we put in for a research grant through 4Cs to help support what makes students successful in online writing courses. So we had a multi-institution huge project that lasted several years looking at what is it that helps determine whether or not a student is successful in online writing courses. And so we were able to get a couple publications and presentations out of that, which was really cool. And one of those presentations was for a society called the Global Society of Online Literacy Educators. And every year they have a virtual conference. And so we presented at their conference, we did a webinar for them. And through that conference, I learned that GSOL had this certification program for people like me who were teaching online, but didn't know anything about it. And so I got to be an instructor mentor for the certification and work with other teachers who are learning how to teach online. And so with some of the people you see in the bottom here, we are now conducting a study about what are the experiences like for those people who complete that online certification. So like when they're done, what do they do with those experiences? And we are most immediately looking at how they have to do e-portfolios and how their e-portfolios support their reflective practice, growth, and identity formation. And, thinking again back to my Google Docs and e-portfolios, like that's something that I'm still thinking and writing about. But still this project, is ongoing, is something that I'm actively involved in now. Okay, so that was a lot, but there are a couple key takeaways I just want to stress, especially for people who are considering graduate school. So there are opportunities for learning and growth everywhere, and they will help open doors. One of our former CRDM students is doing her PhD in English and AI at Stony Brook, and she is part of a grant through the engineering department that's looking at AI in some capacity. So when she was in CRDM, she worked for the Writing Center, and she took a course on AI and writing. But because she had those two experiences, she is now part of this huge grant where she gets to work with people across all sorts of disciplines. And like her experiences in the Writing Center are why they picked her to be part of this project. And now that she's doing this project, she's going to have all of these incredible opportunities. So, keep in mind that there are opportunities all around you that you can use and that will help open different doors. The next thing I'd say is to find ways to get involved and really get a better understanding of the field and the work, and not just what you see professors doing every day, but kind of behind the scenes. Um, when I was considering doing a PhD, Dale had me talk to his partner, who was a librarian at Windsor. And she she had her PhD in English. And as a PhD student, she won all sorts of awards. She was an incredible PhD student. But she applied for hundreds of jobs and did not get a job as a professor. And so the people that you see teaching your classes, like these are the people who made it. So you need to talk to the people who are adjuncts, who are contingent, just to be aware of what the reality is like for professors and what your job could possibly involve. I think being open to evolving is so important. Hopefully you'll see the threads of my research that even though I didn't get to work on Eliza Haywood, that my research like shifted in really interesting ways. And without that openness to evolving, I don't think I'd be where I am today. And so being open to having your mind change, your ideas change, and to grow, I think is really great. Get to know yourself and what you need to be successful, especially as you are considering a PhD program. I knew that like I wanted attention from my professor, so I did not want a lot of competition. I needed strong mentors, I needed good collaborators, and that I needed like a small program. That was really important to me, and that was what helped me be successful in my PhD, but also helped me, know that my job here at NSU was the right one because I love that similar kind of environment here. And then find collaborators, mentors, and people who will champion you and keep you accountable. It's really easy to not do your dissertation. It's really easy to find, to get burnt out, get tired. So find people who will kind of be there for you and then help you along the way. And then finally, I just want to say that the people you meet in graduate school can make really the biggest impact on your life. Most of those people in this picture were part of our English graduate program. Several of us are now married. Several people met because of connections through the graduate program. So you never know how your time in a program will impact you and just really change your life. So thank you so much for your time tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions you have or talk more about any of these projects, but I just really appreciate all of you being here. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Morris. That was fantastic. So, for those of you that are watching, and would like to ask some questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A session. So, obviously, Dr. Morris, just listening to your journey was fantastic to hear. It's a journey that I'm sure a lot of faculty have been on and really then found their passion. I mean, you mentioned a couple of different jobs here and there. Um, I don't know if I specifically heard it, but with your time here at NSU, what's made you stay? Because sometimes faculty do move around. So what's really kind of kept you at NSU?
I would say the people that I work with and the students that I work with. NSU, our program in the Department of Communication Media, the Media and the Arts, and the Composition, Rhetoric, and Digital Media Master's program especially, is very unique because of all of the writing faculty who are here. Like I said, at Cincinnati, there was only a couple students who were writing students or composition students. Same thing with Windsor. And so to be in a program where all of your professors are in this field and you really get a sense of the breadth and the depth of the field is just so amazing. So I love having people that I work with who are interested in the same things that I am, that value the same things that I am. And just like the students are so incredible. I feel so lucky that I get to teach undergraduate and graduate students and work with students in the Writing Center. So I see students in all sorts of capacities, and I learn so much from my students, and it's just an incredible experience to watch them grow and find what they love and do what they want to do.
Absolutely. And we do have a question, so I will read that off for you. So the student says, hi, Dr. Morris, great job. Thank you so much. How would you recommend we A, reach out to program directors, and B, look for scholarships? Gen G.
So I think that, looking at department websites and finding who the graduate studies person is a great place to start. They're the ones who can connect you with other graduate students, who can send you more information about the program. I would start there, but I think along with talking to the directors, it's really important to talking to other students and to go to the campus if you can. I know that having the chance to go to Cincinnati, meet the other grad students there, that's one of the things that really influenced me to know that that's where I would go. But I think that anybody who is overseeing a graduate program would love to hear from you. They want you to reach out to them and ask questions. So never feel bad about that. And then scholarships, I would say they are probably a good place to start with scholarships, but also to be a little bit creative when you're thinking about opportunities. So I know sometimes students here think about the writing center or working for the department, those feel like the more obvious ones. But there's so many other great things people could do on campus. One of our current CRDM students is working for the athletic department doing communication type work for them. So you don't have to just stick with the department, but you do, I think, have to be a little creative when you're looking for opportunities. If you're going to conferences, lots of organizations have scholarships that support you. I know when I mentioned about DMAC or Dartmouth, they have scholarships that help support graduate students.
Awesome. And also just on that note, with the question itself, Please feel free to contact my staff, any of our admissions representatives. I know most of you will be working with obviously Farah, but feel free to give us a call. We are happy to try and connect you with faculty to send you any of the program information sheets, go over any of the classes, the credits, all of that stuff is something that we are happy to do and do every day. So please do not feel like you're going to bother us if you were calling us a couple times a week, sending us emails. We love doing it. We love. I will speak for Farah in this because I know it's true. We love helping students get to that next stage. So while Dr. Morris has had her path to be a faculty member and professor, my staff has had their path to get to the place that we're at. And a big part of that is we love helping our students get going in their programs. So one person didn't have a question, but she said, thank you very much. Love this, Dr. Morris. Appreciate your transparency and insights as always.
Thank you. I really, really just like so appreciate all of you being here and listening and your time. Like I'm so thankful.
We do have another question that was, are there any internships, client projects, community partnerships, anything that can connect students like kind of directly with employers?
Yes. I mean, there are many, many of them. Dr. Kitchens, who's our grad program director, she has more insight to that. I don't work with a lot of the internship students, but students all the time are doing incredible things. And so she has a list of contacts. I know through the department we have contacts. And then our students have been very successful to find those connections in the community. So that's absolutely something that is available.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Dr. Morris. We do have time for probably a couple more questions. I want to make sure that we are nice to Dr. Morris because I'm sure she is very busy. So we do try and keep it to right around that 45 minutes to an hour. So while we're kind of waiting for any more questions to come in, I do want to remind everybody that we have our virtual open house coming up next month. So please keep an eye out for any emails from Farah, myself, any that are coming from NSU. If they say anything virtual, will most likely be emails about that virtual event where you'll get to learn there more about the admissions process, some of the scholarships that NSU offers. Some of our faculty will be there. I believe Dr. Kitchens will be there. So you'll kind of get to learn more about the application side and the program side from a curriculum outcome and things like that, as well as we'll be introducing our new Ph.D., which we are very excited and looking forward to, and a couple of different pathways that do come along with that. One of them being the master's directly to Ph.D., which is very exciting. I was happy the department put that together.
And I know that several people who are here, like that is something they might be considering. So like definitely go to the event, talk to Dr. Kitchens. Like she has so much more information and our students are amazing. So like I would love the opportunity to continue working with them at this higher level where we can get more in depth and really explore like the kind of path that you want to go on.
Absolutely. That's a very, very good point. It's nice to hear though. It's nice to reaffirm that as well. So I don't see any other questions. So again, I want to make sure I don't hold you up too much tonight, Dr. Morris, as you're taking a lot of your time to meet with us this evening. So for those of you that are watching tonight, thank you very much once again for being here. And for those of you that are watching this later on our YouTube channel, please feel free to like it, take a comment, ask any questions on there as well, because we will be doing this wonderful post because I would want to share this with as many people as possible. So once again, thank you so much for being here, everybody. I look forward to hopefully seeing you around campus and to answer any phone calls or emails as you guys see fit. Hope you have a great night, Dr. Morris and everybody else, and we will talk to y'all soon.
Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.